quote, "Black Americans, a group often identified as beneficiaries of the welfare state in America, made considerable economic progress in the 20th century." Fine, of course, but much, if not most, this is the thing with you, the dependent clause is where the sting is, but much, if not most, of this progress was prior to the massive expansion of the American welfare state, close quote. That is so I want to say counterintuitive, because we hear so much about African American progress since civil rights and the establishment of the welfare state that it really has become a kind of American intuition. Explain yourself, Dr. Sowell.
Well, as of 1940, 87% of black households were in poverty. Over the next 20 years, that declined to 47%. This is all prior to the civil rights laws, prior to the social welfare policies of the Johnson administration. Over the next 20 years, it fell an additional 18 points. But that was just the same trend continuing at a reduced rate. Affirmative action is even worse, because as I remember, I'm trying to think now, the numbers. I think it was something like, poverty rate was something like 30% among black households before affirmative action. And a decade after affirmative action, it was 29%. This is not the same as the 40% decline that occurred before there were any civil rights laws and before there was any social welfare state.
And so what happened between 1940 and 1960 was the post-Second World War economic boom.
It was
right?
but it was also the massive migration of blacks out of the South.
So they're getting better education and jobs.
That's right.
Okay. Now, you mention cultural and social retrogressions. Again, I'm quoting you. Arguably the most consequential of these was the decline in two-parent families.
Yes.
Close quote. Explain that one. Among African Americans.
Yes.
We're still talking about African Americans.
Well, you know, when they talk about things like this, they talk about the legacy of slavery.
Right.
And I argue, well, empirically, it's not that, it's the legacy of the welfare state. Because as of 1960, which is almost 100 years after slavery ended, the majority of black kids were being raised in two-parent households. But within one generation after the welfare state, that had dropped down to a minority. So that the majority of black kids today are raised in one-parent households. When you think about it, I mean, centuries of slavery and generations of Jim Crow did not destroy the black family, but one generation of the welfare state did.
The Moynihan Report, what was it, a call for national action?
Yes.
The Negro family, a call for national action, 1965, and even
Right.
50 years ago. And his principal point of alarm, and again, now I'm trying to recall the statistics, but I believe the out-of-wedlock birth rate among African Americans in 1965 was 25%.
Something like that, yeah.
And he was so alarmed that he wrote this report, and today it's over 70%. And
Yes.
by the way, the rate among whites is over 1/3 at this stage.
Yes.
So how does the family breakdown fit into an economic understanding? Is it something, the social breakdown of the American family is something that we have to understand aside from the tools of economics? It just doesn't fit into supply and demand curves and
certainly
economic history?
this occurred at a time when the black income was rising. And so we're saying that previous generations of blacks with lower income and more racial barriers, the family stuck together under those conditions. And under the new conditions, which were advertised to make for great progress, in fact created retrogressions. And I think many people who were gung-ho for the idea that this was going to be progress simply cannot bring themselves to look at the evidence and say, my God, we made things worse.